Is the argument around mismanagement easier to land with someone like Justin Trudeau than Mark Carney, or is there a potential vulnerability for the Carney government because of what Brian just laid out, that Mark Carney did position himself so clearly during the election as, you know, a manager, a competent manager of the economy?
Yeah, no question that that was a main selling point for Mr. Carney during the campaign. But I think that Canadians still hang their hats on that. Canadians are still looking at him as the person who can stand up to Trump, deal with the budgetary situation, and they know that there was already a massive deficit projected in the 60 billion range, so it might grow to 70 or 90 billion. They know that that's a possibility, and they also know that even though it is a bit self-serving to say, oh, Algoma Steel, here's a check for $500 million from Ontario and the feds, and that's why we're running up this deficit. People see through that, but they also know that it's necessary. Because if you don't have these big industries, and if they all fail because of the short-term effect of these Trump tariffs, then Canada is the loser long term. I think that's the big difference. When you're in opposition, you fire at this stuff. I've always believed, and I understood your reference to be about that. I've always believed that governments should not take in more than what they need and shouldn't spend more than what's necessary for the programs that are essential for people. But that last part has changed radically. So we're not only talking about the government programs that we've known about in the past, but the government has to step up to the plate now and help companies like Algoma Steel. Otherwise, again, long term, we'll be losers. So we've got to get past the Trump phase. It is temporary. It'll be a couple of years. He's already going to be a lame duck in a year. So that'll all change rapidly. But for now, we're very vulnerable, and Canadians understand that.
I imagine, Lisa, that the government, like Brian and Tom both pointed out, will tie the deficit to things like the announcement today or other supports necessary because, in their view, of what's happening with Donald Trump. Does that, do you think, inform or change the Conservative rebuttal at all? Or do you imagine that it stays very much like deficit bad no matter what?
Well, I think that what the Conservatives will attempt to do, and I hope they do, is try to give a little context around it. And the very beginning in 2015, the Liberals said we're going into a deficit because now is the time to invest. Money is cheap and we can do this. And then we went into deficit because it was COVID and they have your back and Canada has to make sure they come out of the pandemic. And now we're faced with yet another crisis, absolutely. But now we have to spend even more. And the key for the Conservatives is to try to get Canadians to think about deficits in the light of, you feel the pain right now in the economy, it's because they've run deficits for the past 10 years. You can argue with me about whether or not that's a true fact, but that is the connectivity between what the Conservatives are saying right now with respect to spending and deficits and what they want Canadians to remember, that a big deficit is actually going to be problematic for them in the short, medium, and long term. But I will say, lastly, I'm in the Port of Montreal today talking to shippers about how the economy is and what the impact of the U.S. tariffs are. And it is absolutely factual that there are problems in the steel industry, that there's problems in the aluminum industry. Shipping is down 50%, 60% in some cases. This is a very real crisis. It's unfortunate, though, that the Liberals have spent the last 10 years talking about deficits as being something that they're allowed to do and there's no impact. And now they really have to do it. And they have to argue with Conservatives that there's not going to be an impact again.